of access to childcare. Okay, with that, does anybody have a safety moment they want to share? Naomi, can I pick on you?
You can. Maybe a heavier safety moment than we're used to on the BEC, but if you haven't seen in the paper or heard on the radio, there was a fatality on the North Slope last week of a worker. And usually on the BEC, we're so heavily focused on workforce development and getting people trained so that they can get jobs. And it's heartbreaking to hear that somebody's died doing the work that we're training them to do. So I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge that. That's an incredible impact to this individual's family, their community, the workforce, the whole slope, the whole state. And I want us all to kind of take a moment to think about your personal responsibility and effect that you have on safety in workforce. No matter what kind of training you're offering, if that's your arena, if you're an employer, what are we doing to protect the workforce after doing all of this work to get them to work? So I'll leave that there.
Thanks, Naomi. All right, so switching gears a little bit, we're going to dive right into our topic. It is no surprise to any of us that Alaska is facing a decline in the childcare workforce numbers. There's high staff turnover, as well as a decline in licensed early care and learning providers that are available. And I'm sure we're going to hear a little bit more about that. There is a report that I'm going to put in the chat, developed by the Child Care Task Force, and there's some good data numbers in there that you can refer to. Now, our goal today here is not to hash out the problem. We already know there is this problem, and we can continue to look at the problem and lament about the problem, but our goal here today is to really start thinking about strategies and solutions, and that's what Stephanie and Leah are going to, and Derotha are going to talk about. Many of us have personally experienced frustrations related to access to childcare, myself included. But when we have our discussion today, I ask everyone to really focus on what is currently taking place as in terms of strategies to help address these problems, and what we in the workforce community can do to further support the strategies that the task force is working so hard to implement. Okay, and with that, I want to pose a question to all of you here at the BEC. How has childcare access actually impacted your business? So I'm going to give you a moment to think. You can put it in the chat or raise your hand. How has childcare access impacted your business? Carrie, I see that you put a thought in the chat. I know, oh, and Amy's raised her hand. Casey, do you want to unmute and make a comment?
I was just sharing that a lot of our staff have had to adjust their schedules, or they have to work hybrid schedules because of the lack of childcare options. So it's been a lot of facilitation for our company to work with everybody in their individual needs for childcare.
And remind us who you're with.
I work with Bristol Bay Native Corporation.
Thank you. And Amy, you've got your hand up.
Good morning. I work with the Alaska Adult Education. in Alaska Adult Education, that Alaska Literacy Program. And we've seen it mostly with our students. We've seen a huge transition from students coming in person to students wanting online classes, which has put a real stress on our distance education program, because it's not the way that our volunteers really want to participate in our program. And so it's really been interesting, because then our staff have to teach those classes. And so the shift has been very noticeable.
Thank you, Amy. And Dan Robinson, I know, Dan, you're with the Department of Labor Research and Analysis, says we're much more liberal about letting people work from home when necessary. Go ahead, Sherry.
Hi, good morning. For me, coming from the trades and being the training organization, apprenticeship recruitment, I've seen a decline in our numbers. Because especially women, of course, being the primary care providers, but we're also seeing it impacting our male participants as well. We see them coming into the program, but we see them having to step away or not being able to stick with us because of changes in the home, changes in the dynamics of the employment status of maybe the wife or the girlfriend, the female partner. And so then the guys are stepping up and having to take a different role. And with us, our trades they're having to be away from home for a considerable amount of times, being on the North Slope primarily. And so we're seeing a dramatic impact as a decline because of that. Thank you.
Thanks, Sherry. Yeah, and those kinds of declines, I'm sure, has direct impact on our economy and the vitality of our workforce in general. Let's see, we have Pamela that said, persons unable to work a full-time job to accommodate kids' school hours. Yep. Desire for education programs. Krishna says desire for education programs. Kayla Corbett, my business is military child care access. We are seeing a sharp rise in military families unable to find care that allows them to go to work. We are needing to do more harm reduction work since quality options are not available. So that's serious. That's a serious statement. Amy has another comment. We have seen an increase in students wanting to open childcare options, but unable to navigate the complexities of the licensing system. Interesting. Right. Anybody else have any thoughts? And ASA staff, feel free to chime in also. You have comments. Right. Well, thank you all. Hopefully that set up ourselves for a conversation with Stephanie and Leah next. I am going to go ahead and invite them to, I think they're already unmuted, but come in and introduce themselves. So Stephanie Berglund is with Thread, and she's the CEO of Thread. Leah Van Kirk is policy advisor at the Commissioner's Office of the Alaska Department of Health. So go ahead and continue to introduce yourself and end your topic today.
Great, good morning. Thank you all for inviting us today. And I really enjoyed that warm-up exercise to kick us off and get grounded. You all are well-versed and know well some of the childcare issues happening in our state. So Leah, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, thank you. My name is Leah Van Kirk. I'm a healthcare policy advisor for Commissioner Hedberg at the Department of Health. And we, have really been focused on how we can improve childcare in Alaska. And so we're really excited to talk to the business community today. And more than any time, I think before, we are seeing the business communities be really invested in helping solve the childcare problems. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and share our screen and get started on our PowerPoint.
And while she's doing that, again, I'm Stephanie Berglund. I'm the CEO of Thread. For those of you who aren't familiar with Thread, we're a private nonprofit. We work across the state to help improve access to affordable and high quality childcare. And we provide direct services, like many of you. We also work in workforce development. We're the largest trainer of early educators across the state and work closely with businesses and communities around childcare solutions. So we're really excited to dive into our conversation. For our agenda today, we are going to focus on setting a quick context for the childcare and business, the intersection. You've all already started that conversation. We're going to then quickly dive into some efforts that are underway to support businesses with childcare needs, and we'll give you some examples of where there's some business and childcare partnerships, and then talk about some action steps and what we all can do next. So as you all were getting grounded, it's no secret that childcare is in crisis in Alaska. There have been challenges in the sector for years, decades really, in relation to access, affordability, and high quality. So unfortunately, over the last handful of years, we've seen that become more challenging. We have seen it more difficult for families to find care. Some of you commented, there was a couple comments in the chat, in fact, that we are now seeing 51% of families not able to work at all, or the amount of hours that they would like to because of access difficulties related to quality childcare. And then we've seen access decline as about 25% of our childcare businesses have closed in the last 4 years. It's also really expensive. I didn't hear many people comment on that in the chat, but we know that that is also a challenge. With inflation, we're seeing actually tuition costs increase. And right now, the average cost that families are paying are about 15% of their household income. And just for context, for many families, and that's with one child, with more than one child in care, we're seeing those costs, of course, exceed their largest expenses, which is, of course, their rent or their mortgage payment. And then we're seeing quality not be what really parents are looking for, what they expect, because access is such an issue. You know, we're seeing families make compromises related to the quality of care they're looking for. And then, as some of you highlighted, that the workforce in early childhood is also having a shortage. So of the child care programs we do have open across the state, not all of them are operating to full capacity because they also are not able to recruit, retain the qualified workforce that they need. So we're seeing high turnover in the sector. We're seeing higher kind of stress and burnout, and that really impacts the quality of care, which of course is continuity of care and reliable care for young children. And related to the business sector, you all highlighted on this, you know, that some of the biggest challenges, of course, are your own recruitment and retention. So there's some stats here that we have surveying the business community, how that's directly impacting related to absenteeism, loss of productivity, and turnover, where businesses are seeing childcare issues impact their workforce. But we know that the business sector can gain when they invest in and partner related to childcare and early childhood needs. So when businesses are investing and kind of looking for opportunities in partnership, we're seeing that they have, of course, the flip side of the statistics related to absenteeism, productivity, and turnover. But beyond that, improved culture in their businesses, higher job satisfaction, and employee engagement. So we'll turn now to talk a little bit about efforts underway to support childcare. And I know that there was a particular interest in hearing about the task force. So we'll start with that with Leah.
Great. Thank you. So yeah, actually in April of 2023, the governor signed Administrative Order 346 in order to develop a task force on childcare. And, you know, as I mentioned earlier, we're seeing and hearing from not just the childcare workforce, but employers across the state that there are challenges in really engaging a workforce across all sectors. And so this is, you know, one piece of a problem that we can really focus on to help improve and develop and increase Alaska's workforce. So the purpose of the task force was to develop a plan to improve the availability and affordability of quality childcare. And, you know, in other states where they have addressed this problem, you hear parents talk about, I really value my childcare provider. I learn a lot from them. My child is excited to go there. I feel really good about continuing to teach them skills when they come home. And so really moving toward not just affordability, and availability, but that quality piece. And so that's been definitely part of our discussions. And so we also wanted to consult existing resources. So what resources do we have that we're utilizing in this state? What policy recommendations would the task force make in review of this? And then we identified focus areas for the work. And so our meetings have focused around background checks, workforce licensing, access, quality, and subsidy. So some of the work in front of us has focused on building those public-private partnerships and thinking about how businesses, the business community, nonprofit organizations can come together to partner to come up with innovative ways that we can address the childcare problems that we're seeing in Alaska. Also with a special focus on employee-sponsored. And so you'll hear me talk about having partnerships with businesses where businesses actually invest in childcare on site or near site. We also noticed that we were getting feedback about policy and regulations. So really taking a look at what our current policy and procedures are, what our current regulations are, and if there are any ways that we can address some of the barriers through policy or through regulatory issues. We also wanted to make sure that we spent some time looking at innovative solutions, something new, something different, maybe some things that have been working in other states that have really improved the overall system. So in 2023, we had many meetings and developed recommendations, and we also had 2 public comment hearings, and that has been really valuable, just like listening to all of you today and some of your challenges related to childcare. When the public comes to the table, it helps really get a sense of what are the most glaring issues and how can we prioritize our work to really address those first. We also, at the end of December, submitted that first set of recommendations to the governor's office. And so that initial report included 33 recommendations across 5 areas of focus. And so you can see those 5 areas that we focused on during the first half of our time together. And when we did that, we brought together local, statewide, and national speakers to help inform, to help educate, to help learn and guide how we could develop and formulate those recommendations. So for instance, a few examples of those recommendations included, like in the area of background checks, we were seeing that in childcare, in order for a staff person to get their fingerprints done, it was a manual process. So in our state, there are many fingerprint processes that are digital and that are transmitted immediately. But for childcare, we were still doing that on paper, putting it in the mail, sending it to the background check unit. And so it was taking 3 to 4 weeks sometimes just for somebody's background check to go through. And so one of the recommendations was to establish a secure online portal for submitting background check applications. We eliminated some of the whitelisting requirements, which was another requirement for childcare providers to have a special type of IP address in order to submit their background checks. So we removed that requirement. And then we're implementing live scan digital fingerprinting at state offices to increase accessibility, to decrease that processing time and cost to providers and applicants. So that's just an example of some of the recommendations that were made. And for the purpose of this audience, I thought it would be more specific about the recommendations around employer-based programs. So it was really important when we were thinking about employers that it was to collaborate more between the business sector and state government because we know how much it's impacting the workforce. And we have employers, reaching out and saying, what can we do? How can we help? How can we contribute? And so some of the recommendations that came up were around considering tax credits and incentives to encourage the private sector. And then also to transform existing spaces into childcare facilities. We also heard that space was one of the major issues when a person is trying to start a new childcare business, particularly a center, because there has to be changes made to the space in order for it to accommodate the different licensing and facility requirements. And so one of the recommendations also was to take an inventory of existing space across state buildings, school districts, and then also to encourage businesses to think about offering space as an incentive on site for childcare providers. We've actually seen not a lot, but it's definitely starting to, I think, happen more often where a business will say, we're going to offer this space for free for you to operate your childcare center and provide allocated space for people within our organization. And I've heard childcare facilities say, if we didn't have that, we wouldn't be able to operate. And so really developing those partnerships has been really helpful, and we're trying to share also things that have been effective and things that have allowed childcare centers to be open, and not only as a benefit to them, but as a benefit to employers and increasing and stabilizing their workforce. One of the other recommendations was to establish a position or contractor to assist employers and businesses with technical assistance for learning how to provide that on-site or near-site childcare. There's a couple of different ways that can happen. So there are actually agencies that businesses can contract with, and they will handle all of the development, implementation, and operation of a childcare facility on site. But also there's some businesses that say, we want to take this on. And so going through that process is it's a very technical process. And it's also important because we want to make sure that children are safe. We want to ensure that they're engaged in high quality environment with staff who are qualified and educated and engaged in meaningful relationships that understand child development. And so having a person who can help a business and support them through that process was something that we identified as an important piece of the puzzle. We also wanted to consider capital funding options for remodeling spaces to meet the childcare health and safety requirements for employee programs or employer programs. So definitely some robust discussions. A little bit later in our presentation, we're going to talk about some of the innovative strategies that we have talked about within our task force meetings as well. So during this I shouldn't say last, but during this 6 months, January through July, we're focusing on subsidies, access and affordability, and quality. And actually today we have our full day in-person Governor's Task Force meeting where we're going through and kind of looking at our final recommendations for our July report. What we've looked at models that other states have used in order to develop the rates around our state rate for childcare. And so we're talking about how we develop that rate. Oftentimes childcare providers are saying, the state rate that we receive for a child on subsidy isn't enough. And then parents end up paying the amount above that, which sometimes can be, upwards of, $600 a month. And so that amount above what our state rate pays can be really problematic for parents gaining access, because that is still a very high amount when they qualify for a subsidy due to their income. So we're looking at different models for determining what our state subsidy rate is. We're looking at innovations and thinking about how can we incentivize new early childhood education and childcare centers. Thread has done much work around innovations through offering grants to communities. And then we've talked about increasing access for children with special needs and making sure that children with special needs can have the same access as any other child, and that if a childcare facility needs additional funding to support their needs, that there's a mechanism and an avenue to provide that support. We've certainly heard that additional support for children's behavioral health is needed, and training for providers who are providing that care. So we're seeing a higher level of burnout for childcare providers because children are needing more support.
So in addition to the governor's task force, there are a few other efforts underway that are in support of childcare. We're excited to share that for the third year in a row, the legislature approved a budget increase for the upcoming FY25 budget. The operating budget includes an additional $7.5 million to support childcare, and that has an intent for some childcare grants to support operating support for childcare programs across the state. Of course, that still needs to be approved by the governor, but we're hopeful for that passage and really thankful for the legislature and their leadership to continue acknowledging in needed and improved and increased investments for childcare. We're also seeing more action at the local government level. We're seeing Juneau having great success. Their city and borough of Juneau has been investing in childcare for many years, investing in new program startups and infrastructure. They've also been investing in infant toddler care, and they've been investing in their early childhood workforce and providing additional workforce and wage stipends to them. In Anchorage, some of you may be familiar with the passage of the ballot initiative related to the marijuana tax being designated to early childhood and childcare. So that planning is underway. That has not started to be implemented, but will in the new municipal fiscal year. And then in Seward, we saw some investments made by their local city council to also support expanding childcare. So we are seeing more increase in local government interest in investments to support childcare, which we know in every situation that is happening at the local government level, they're also partnering with local businesses, to come together for local solutions and partnership. I also wanted to highlight another bill that passed, SB 189, actually contained components of what for most of the session was HB 89. Which includes business tax credits and the new position that was a part of the recommendations of the task force to support businesses. So the specifics of what this includes is an increase to the education tax credit from 1 to 3 million. And it also establishes, again, the program to partner with the private sector to create more incentives for employers to develop that on-site and near-site childcare that again was one of the recommendations of the task force. So specifically, I wanted to highlight, you can go to the next slide, the tax credits can be applied for operating a childcare facility for children of the person's employees. It also can be for contributions of cash or equivalent to a childcare facility attended by one or more of your employees, and then also a payment to the employee or of the person's business made by the person for the purpose of offsetting the employee's childcare costs. So that's a lot of legal language, but just wanting to share that the tax credits are available to any company that's tax paying oil and gas, fisheries, and mining. So we're really excited about that. Again, that policy is still working its way through the governor's desk, but we're hopeful for that bill in support of childcare. And I just want to acknowledge this is the first ever childcare bill to pass the legislature. So this is a big milestone in support of childcare in our state. So thank you to all who helped with that. Yeah, we'll talk about some examples.
Yeah, so we wanted to share some examples, and one that I think rises to the surface, and we actually invited them to present to the governor's task force, is Credit Union One. And so they have a childcare on site, and their employees are employees of the Credit Union One. And so it really has addressed many things. One, the childcare employees receive all of the same benefits as their regular Credit Union One employees. And so the wages are more comparable. It comes with benefits and leave. Also, they provide employee stipends for children receiving care, but they really saw an increase in people working there over long periods of time, which in improved quality. We know that the relationships that children have with their childcare provider are meaningful and increase quality. And so the value of having and retaining staff that are taking care of your children really are beneficial to their long-term relationships and learning. And so he also said, and I thought this was really great to share. He said, it was joyful having children around, and that impacted our business and our employees, even employees who didn't have children. And so Credit Union One, I think, is a great example of how on-site childcare, an on-site childcare facility can support the workforce, can support the quality of the care that's being provided, and can just increase that stability of a workforce because it's available. We also see that there are business partnerships with childcare providers to secure spots. So for instance, providing building space, and that then secures 8 spots for that business's employees. That's been something that's been really successful and used in different places around the state. And then also there are businesses that support childcare programs tuition and support increased educational opportunities for childcare employees. One of the innovative models that we've also shared with the governor's task force is the tri-share model. And so actually just at our last meeting, we had Michigan, the state of Michigan and the state of North Carolina present about the tri-share model, which is a model where the cost of childcare is shared between the employer, the employee, and the state. And so tri meaning divided by 3. And so it's been really interesting to hear about how Michigan has implemented that and how North Carolina has implemented that. But certainly, you know, something innovative and something different. I think there are about 5 other states that are looking at this model. And, you know, we know that about 7% of people who are utilizing childcare qualify or use a subsidy. But we have many other, you know, middle income, moderate income earners who are really struggling with the cost of childcare that don't qualify for a subsidy. And so when we talk about, you know, raising rates to childcare because it doesn't meet the childcare need, we also have to be really mindful that that is expensive for most families who are using childcare. And so coming up with some innovative models that address, you know, large population of people who are utilizing childcare and creating some opportunities for them based on affordability.
Then I also wanted to highlight some innovative community cooperatives that are happening out of North Dakota. Every other year, Thread hosts an economic impact summit, and we had North Dakota featured and present at the summit this past fall, where they talked about how they have invested through their electric corporations, which is really creative, and their rural economic development group. So different than economic development, but rural development focused on quality of life in North Dakota, where they have set up some business infrastructure for 3 creative models to support childcare focused in rural communities in North Dakota. So one is employer-assisted childcare cooperative. So where they're helping businesses come together in a co-op model to invest in initial setup, including the space, like Leah said, is a big issue, but setting up some initial kind of business practices and that initial operation to support the childcare, and then it's self-sustaining kind of after that. They also have a model where they have community-owned childcare programs. So often in rural remote, which is relative also for Alaska, they have areas that have no childcare, and so their cities are allowed to open and operate community-based childcare programs. And then they have also support and system set up around helping communities start nonprofit childcare in their communities. So they're investing in really the administrative infrastructure to help with bringing the community together, kind of making a plan, looking at all the different assets, how people can partner together for creative cooperatives. And they've seen huge expansion in rural cooperatives in North Dakota, which is really great. And then we would be remiss if we didn't highlight the Department of Defense. Sometimes people don't know the military's been investing in quality childcare for decades now. They are really a gold star model across the country, providing high quality accredited childcare. Many people don't see it because of, behind installation doors, but recognizing that that is a key. They are, of course, I think they're the largest employer in the country, but they're investing in high quality childcare, recognizing that is one of the key components needed to support the workforce. And just a quick note that Thread does provide some supports and resources for businesses. We can do presentations like today on early care and learning, provide kind of the latest research and data in your community. We can provide some consultation, and of course, we're scaling our advocacy. So we invite you to join us in advocacy. I talked about some of the legislative action this year, so invite you to be advocates and share that this is important with policymakers. We do have a page on our website for businesses and communities, so I just wanted to flag that URL for you there. We have some tips and tools for businesses, and we also have a great HR checklist there where you can start for some kind of a self-assessment on how you're doing with your benefits and support for childcare. In addition, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation is a great resource. I actually have a couple handouts, Mari, that I can send you to forward to the group. But two that I wanted to highlight are one called Workforce Today and Workforce Tomorrow, and the Leading the Way Toolkit. They have step-by-step guides for you as businesses about kind of ways you can lead conversations, do like more of that self-assessment I talked about that Thread has some similar resources around, and how you can creatively think about how childcare can fit into your business and what opportunities there are for you all to engage in strengthening childcare opportunities for your employees. And then just a few, things of like, you might be wondering what you can do right now. So there's opportunity for partnership related to investment. So there's opportunity to make investment. We talked about how it's going to take government, not only parent investment, but our community and business investment as well. We've talked about the workforce. You all are concerned about your workforce, and we are also, paying attention to the early childhood workforce, especially in a time that the workforce is highly competitive across Alaska for a lot of the same skills and resources. And so we want to recognize the early childhood workforce and invest in them. We want to support working families across the state. We want families, of course, to stay and to work and live and grow and thrive in Alaska. So we know that it's important for them to have access to care. And then we can work together for more innovation and keep leveraging local supports and partnerships to support what's needed. And we'll stop there. Happy to have a discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much to the both of you for that really enlightening presentation. I know we had some really great questions in the chat. Carrie Ann, would you mind reading some of those questions? I know there was one about access for military.
Sure.
For the military.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So Lisa put in there that she's happy to hear about the public being brought to the table with the mention of public-private partnerships. How are these opportunities being made available to military families, with military families having to navigate a new state and sometimes a new country where departments are named different things? How is this information being distributed? And many military spouses would like to work and are experiencing a lot of the same issues without the backup of family members being readily available. So that was Lisa's comment and question. Any response on the military question?
We're seeing the military childcare struggle the same way we're seeing community-based childcare struggle. So they are doing what they can to support their workforce with increased wages. I think for many installations, they're offering benefits such as like the early educator, their first child can be free in tuition, so that it can benefit that family and, help early educator and worker. Of course, the military has great benefits and a strong professional development and training plan for early educators, but we are seeing them have struggles. I know specifically in JBER that not all of their programs are open, again, because of an early educator workforce shortage. So Thread partners closely with them. One of Thread's lines of business is providing free childcare referrals to any parent who's looking for childcare. So we have seen an increase in calls and connections with military families who are looking for childcare off base and are having some of the same struggles. So we know that that's an issue. It's a mission readiness issue for military that is a concern, and we're actually working closely with our fellow federal delegation to make sure that they're aware of the issue and to seek support for that.
I would just add one thing, which is, the governor's task force recognizes that childcare for the military setting is really important. And so we do have a representative from military childcare on the task force to help bring those issues to the table when we're discussing recommendations.
Mm-hmm.
So, and another comment came in on the military topic from Kayla Corbett that said one thing that would be helpful for military families is Alaska's participation in the MCCYN Plus program. It allows military families to use DoD fee assistance at centers that are not nationally accredited, but are quality rated through the state's quality rating system. Any follow-up on that, Kayla, or comment from the panel?
I can comment on that, Kayla. Thank you for your very technical question. So that acronym stands for Military Childcare in Your Neighborhood. So it is a bridge, of military childcare and community-based childcare. And it's a great model. Alaska does have a quality rating and improvement system. We call it a quality recognition and improvement system, and our system is called Learn and Grow. For those of you who aren't familiar with what that means, it's really a framework for quality. It's a framework for how programs can, beyond the foundation of licensing, which is health and safety regulations and programs, it helps them build, high quality. How do they have stronger interactions, social emotional supports for children and their teachers? How are they focused on professional and development and training? How are they looking at their environment, making sure they have high quality curriculum to support learning and activity during the day? And then how are they supporting families and having intentional engagement with families? So we have looked at and explored how to expand Thread services to offer this program. And unfortunately, Alaska is not completely eligible. We don't have a fully rolled out Learn and Grow system. So we have levels 1 through 3 out of a 1 through 5 system. So right now we have limited qualification and eligibility to be partners in that. So we do have goals around, and I think we'll be talking today about recommendations related to expanding Learn and Grow. So that's certainly one of the areas we know that we want to focus on is not only expanding access in Alaska, but expanding that high quality access. So families, including military families like the program you mentioned, can have the access that and to take full advantage of some of the resources that are available.
Great. And just this last question from Casey at BBNC is, how is the task force interacting with tribes in Alaska in these childcare conversations?
Yeah, thank you. A really important question. So we have a tribal representative also as a member of the task force, and that has been really helpful because it absolutely contributes to many of the childcare access points in rural Alaska. And tribes can also provide a subsidy to tribal members. They can tribally approve smaller facilities. And one recommendation that actually came out of really our tribal representative bringing this to the table and engaging other tribal members to contribute is developing, one of the recommendations is to make sure that tribes are exempt from the state licensing requirements because tribes already have federal oversight. and to make sure that tribes can implement the authority to license their own facilities. So that tribal component has been really important. Another discussion is around piloting some different provider types in rural communities, because it's so difficult to build facilities, and there may not be a need to build facilities, but looking at some other more culturally grounded and appropriate options.
I would just add that, we're open to opportunities for partnership and strengthening those relationships. I think like other systems, like our health system in Alaska, the childcare systems run a bit parallel between the state, regulations like Leah was talking about and tribal childcare. So we're always looking at how we can strengthen, align, and, kind of look at that collaboration to really, leverage and really blend and braid all of our funding streams, to maximize the supports for children and families.
Thank you. I have a question. You've talked a lot about how businesses can consider setting up their own childcare, but what advice do you have for small nonprofits, smaller organizations, or just businesses where it isn't going to be feasible to set up a childcare facility, under their roof, but that there's still a desire for some partnership, and there's still a desire to do something? What advice would you have for that particular group?
Our advice is always to start with looking at your HR benefits, really kind of starting, and somebody put in your warm-up question, Mari, in the chat, to lean into flexibility. That's the one thing that we're hearing from surveys from workers across the country, but then also Alaska, is starting with, one, like, know your employees and know your demographics. It was really interesting. I'll just say one of the things we learned and saw and heard from businesses during the pandemic of, with this new Zoom world, like some people didn't even know their employees had kids until they were like seeing them jumping on the couch in the background, so, recognizing like, who are your employees? What are their demographics? What are their needs? What are their family makeup? What are their childcare needs? And then really taking a keen look at, what are your benefits, supports, and resources that can help. So flexibility is one, but it's really unrealistic to think that people can work full-time from home and kind of have full dependent care. That's way too hard. So I think setting the realistic expectations of what we can do, but looking at benefits, making sure you're maximizing all of your flexible spending, tax credits we talked about, making sure you're maximizing all the employee supports that are available. And then looking at, creative solutions for what partnerships are available with other businesses, and the immediate surrounding community is where I would start. So we have that link in our PowerPoint for our HR checklist. So that's a great place to start.
Thank you. Great advice. We have Carrie Miller that says, 100% agree, Stephanie. Being HR, I stress with leadership that we need to be flexible, especially with ASD start times changing this upcoming year. We need to support our employees on all fronts on that. For that, we have a hand up from Charity Shandel with the Native Village of EAC. Go ahead, Charity.
Good morning. We had the state licensing gals come down. Oh, it's been about a month and a half ago, and so they let us know that for rural communities, we have the option that we can ask our cities, as long as it's compliant with the zoning, which they could alter to give access to a group home being within a commercially zoned building and running a group home, that they will not give licensing qualifications to people who live like in Anchorage under that, but for remote areas, that is something to consider, and that you're able to have up to 12 children.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent example of looking at the individual needs of communities and providing some even education support around how you can increase access.
Thank you for raising that point. Sherry with Teamster, go ahead.
Hi, thanks again. I just want to say thank you to the ladies for the work that they're doing. I'm on the board of Best Beginnings, which, if you're not familiar, is the Alaska's early childhood investment is what we do. Is so in addition to being Teamster, but I'm also on that board. And then there's programs, and I think that's something that's important. And I think Thread, of course, is a wonderful partner, and that the other types of things that are available. Outside of just general daycare or care providing, what other, like our entity, we have summer programs for kids. How can we expand programs that are outside of the traditional care providers? I see parents all the time who, they're actively watching that list to come out as to what summer programs are going to be available. And if you blink, they're all full, right? So how can we also expand, or what other things would you like to share about that?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I think we often hear that there are not enough resources for parents overall, like you're talking about, not just in formal care, but then other respite care, needs. We know that there are other like weekend and evening care needs. There's special need care needs, camps, kind of so that maybe you just need a couple weeks a year, and just other learning opportunities. So we get calls all the time that parents are looking for kind of free, fun, parent activities. So I think there's a huge shortage of those in Alaska across the board. And there's only opportunity to do more of those. I don't have a lot to share specifically with you, other than there's just a large need overall to look beyond the formal care system and even look for other, family resources and supports to expand across the state.
Yeah, no, I think I would just be aligned right there. And, I would say that, built into our regulation is an exemption for short-term and alternative programming like that. So it doesn't require childcare licensing. And so, I think, I think I just agree with what Stephanie said. That's absolutely a need for our kids in Alaska.
Thank you. And I know that both Stephanie and Leah have to go right at 9 o'clock, but I just wanted to end this conversation with an invitation for you to give a call to action to this group. What would be your call to action for the Business Education Compact?
I have two. One is, if you are so inclined, to send the governor a note to say, please support the policy and funding that was approved by the legislature, and we're hopeful for that to continue. And on that note, I think just make sure that you're registered to vote and be an informed voter. Is that voter education is always something that we're interested in at Thread. And then two, I would say close to home, again, what we already shared is get to know who your employees are, understand their needs, look at concretely, your HR resources and supports, and look at how you can be a more family-friendly employer. So that's where to start.
Yep, I think that's great.
Yeah.
Oh, you're on mute, Marie.
Sorry about that. Well, thank you both again for joining us, and we will send out the recording and some notes from the session. So we'll connect later, and it looks like there's some desire to connect in the chat as well. So we'll make sure we capture that and connect you to everyone.
Great. Thank you all.
Yep. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.
And with that, I would like to now invite Derotha Ferroro with South Peninsula Hospital. She's the Marketing and PR Director. She is going to tell us a little bit about how her organization has taken a unique approach in addressing the child care problem. Go ahead, Derotha.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me okay? Yeah. Okay, great. So I will screen. So I am the Director of Public Relations and Marketing for our small community hospital. And let me find my little, where's my little screen share? we practice, and now I'm not seeing where it is, Mari.
Should be on the bottom and a green arrow in the
Got
center.
it. Thank you. Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
So I am the Director of Public Relations and Marketing for South Peninsula Hospital, which is in Homer, Alaska. Hopefully you've all been. Is the big screen showing the big picture?
Yeah.
Good. So this is a picture of Homer, of our hospital. So our hospital is a unique partnership in that that building, the facilities, they are owned by our borough, the county, the equivalent of the county, right? The borough then contracts a nonprofit, which is who I work for, South Peninsula Hospital Incorporated. And then that nonprofit ends up running the whole thing. We employ over 600. We're the largest employer on the Southern Peninsula. And I would say we're certainly the largest healthcare provider. The next closest one is Soldotna. So just one screen to recap the need. We all know it. Employees were complaining, right? Employees were resigning because they just couldn't make it to their shift. Other employees were carrying the burden and the load. So no different than everybody else, we were seeing really high consequences and problems because of the lack of childcare, both licensed childcare and just childcare in general. So thank goodness that Thread put out a grant program. And the grant program was $15 million in grants were made possible through the American Rescue Plan Act and the Coronavirus Response and Relief Act. And the Thread announced the grant program, 68 applications happened, and we were thrilled that we were one of the applications that were awarded. So we ended up getting awarded 1.3 million in our grant. And just a brief breakdown on what that was $500,000 for building renovations of a building we currently owned, 270,000 for staffing, and you see the breakdown there for everything else. So that was great news. We were all super excited that this was going to help us with our employee satisfaction and being able to continue to offer healthcare services on a reliable way in a high quality way. So we already had a committee that had been kind of tracking the need and complaining to our employer about the situation for several years. And they had actually already been doing some pretty creative things. For example, they had established a Facebook page that was just for hospital employees to be able to communicate maybe about, I'm in a crisis, can somebody help me tomorrow, or I'm going to have to call in sick, or working with the local licensed provider to reserve some spots specifically for hospital, that the hospital was subsidizing to make sure that some spots were always there. So we already had data right at our fingertips. That allowed us to be able to put the application in quickly. But as soon as we got the grant award, boom, we did another staff survey. And in that staff survey, we learned that there were 77 children, just of the people who answered the survey, who needed care. And that was very different than what we had put in our application, which was for 40 children needing care. Another crisis is not, as you know, is not just the lack of the childcare spots, but it's also just the lack of people that are willing to work in childcare. And this is just a screen that shows the state numbers, statewide, the numbers that were of the decline in workers. So we made sure that our grant application focused on the fact that we were going to train up additional workforce. We were not going to displace. So we put funding in our grant application to be sure that we had funding to train people. So our tuition considerations, we have to consider, that it is more expensive for your infants and toddlers and preschoolers as opposed to school-age children. And we wanted to be competitive with the other licensed childcare as well as non-licensed. and looking around the state. So this is just a draft of what our tuition will be. We still are landing on that, but that is just a draft of what we're looking at. So the site itself, the gray building in the photo on the left, that is the building that we're talking about. That is historically the National Bank of Alaska building, and then it has changed hands many times since. We, at the time of putting the application in, that is where our home health, our functional medicine clinic, our training center that a big room that we use to do all of our clinical trainings, and some billing staff for our family care clinic, all were located in that building. So when we got awarded the grant, the first thing we had to do was relocate everybody. So we had to go lease another building in town for the training center, and then we had to relocate those other offices into basements or unfinished spaces in other buildings that we had. So we had a lot of work to do just to create the space that we were using. These are the grounds. This is a look. So that yellow footprint, that's the actual building that was in this photo right there. It's kind of a T building. So that is the building. And then all of the red is the required space for licensed. As you may or may not know, licensed childcare has very prescribed requirements for staffing ratios, indoor square footage, outdoor square footage, number of bathrooms, number of amount of nap space. It just is very, very prescribed for purposes of best practices to institute best practices and safety. But you can see that the required footprint for the outdoor area ends up being more than double the size of the building itself, just because of kind of the way the layout is. So we really have had our work cut out for us as far as taking concrete parking lot and odds and ends, nooks and crannies, and making those outdoor usable outdoor spaces. So for this summer, we are renovating the building, and we've already come up with unexpected hurdles. Number one being that bad word called asbestos. We're building out the outside areas. We're getting all the permits and inspections. We're holding weekly staff briefings with our staff. We're developing our program structure, all those types of things. We're using a lottery. We're going to announce open enrollment, and it'll be by lottery, and there will be certain deadlines and certain times, and you put in the lottery, and then based on that, then the childcare staff will follow through. So our problem right now is that we're already out of money. We got about $1 million in the grant, and just to date, we're already at $970,000. We haven't even hired the day-to-day staff or anything like that. Our purpose with the grant was to get us 50% enrolled, and then the hospital would take it from there to run it. And we're not even open yet, and we've already exceeded the cost of what we had said in our grant application. So some of those reasons were the renovations. We ran into not only physical, we all are dealing with old buildings in the state of Alaska that have not been maintained well and weren't necessarily built to current codes. So that's an issue, but also we're ending up renovating the building for more children than what we wrote the grant for. Number two, the big issue then is those numbers then generate more staffing, more supplies, all of the, it's like a trickle out. So all of the categories then end up being greater. So now our biggest thing, while the crews are working on the building, our biggest thing now is fundraising. So we've already gotten a grant from our hospital foundation. It's the largest grant ever they've given because they're more in the $5,000 grant range. They give grants for a piece of art or that type of thing, and they've never been involved in high-end things, but they were able to secure enough to give us a $50,000 grant for some equipment And we are very busy writing other applications and going out to large businesses and just trying to find additional funding to get us over the finish line. So I would end just with some tips. Get ready, because this is a nationwide problem, which means that there are going to be some nationwide resources to address it. So get all of your data gathered, do your surveys now, find out how many people have missed a shift over the last 3 to 6 months because of childcare, get lists going, develop partnerships in your community. Like, we had real strong partnerships already with our college and our high school. So in our grant application, we were able to say right in it that we'll work with the college to hire or the high school to hire interns. We'll work with the college to do local trainings. So having those partnerships already developed, then when the opportunity comes, you're just doing a quick email to those partners and saying, can I count on you for this? So I cannot stress how important that is, because the turnaround on that grant application it felt like overnight. It wasn't. It might have been 30 days or 60 days, but boy, if you don't have your homework already ready, that feels like overnight, because you already have full-time work to do. Stay informed. Get on your list with your Chamber of Commerce, your city newsletters, talk to your public health office. Public health right now has a great Healthy and Equitable Communities program that stays informed on this type of thing. See if your borough has a health coalition, but stay informed on what's going on around you. Ask for help while you're working on any type of ask. Over budget. Do not cut corners. Over budget. Licensed childcare is expensive to create. So over budget. Under promise when communicating to your staff. I would say that's probably our number one hiccup, that we got so excited when we got the grant. We said, oh, and we're going to be open by the summer of 24. And it's the summer of 24 and we're not open. And just all of those little things chip away at employee confidence. And think outside the box. Little things matter. So while until the problem is overall solved, just like doing those, okay, the examples I gave at the beginning, we had an example with our local licensed childcare provider where we as an employer, we paid for 3 spots, and those spots were always there. So no matter what, there was an opportunity. We actually subsidize a very small percent of employees' costs there. We created platforms. We do safe sitter training. And so we were able to connect employees with safe sitter graduates that they wanted to connect with in a confidential way, and that a self-disclosed way that they wanted that. So just kind of being creative until the problem's solved. Be creative on those little things, because if employees see you trying to just chip away and help them in small ways, it really makes a difference. So I'll stop sharing, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you. That was fascinating, Derotha. And I just want to echo what Jamie Smith from Providence is saying in the chat, that this is amazing work. This really is going to be such a benefit for your employees and the community in the childcare spaces that you're freeing up. So wonderful, wonderful. Are there any questions for Derotha from the BEC? Okay, well, I would like to open it up for some comments. So I would challenge everyone here in the BEC room to think about, what is your one takeaway from this session? We've heard several excellent call to action from our first 2 presenters. Thank you, Carrie Ann, for putting it in the chat, sending a note to the governor to support the legislation for additional funding, becoming an informed voter, and getting to know your, and as a business, getting to know your employers, being a family-friendly employer, extending flexibility if you're not able to do what South Peninsula Hospital was able to do and start your own licensed childcare facility, which, you know, obviously is not going to be a reality for everyone. But what is the one takeaway that you had from this session? You can go ahead and put it in the chat or raise your hand. Jacqueline Summers from Health Tie and Paxora Solutions says creativity and partnerships can really make an impact.
Mari, I don't know how to raise my hand. I'm sorry. I'm
okay.
Just going to jump in. So I just want to say thank you to all of our presenters today. I found it very informative in a number of ways. One, as an employer, to keep in mind the needs of our very small staff. And we try to be flexible, and I appreciate the reminders of how to get to know your staff, make sure that we are addressing their needs. And also as a workforce development professional and being involved currently with the state and the Denali Commission in building our statewide cross-industry workforce development plan, this information is very, very helpful. I know that's going to be a topic that's going to come to the surface in our workforce plan that we hope to have out soon. So just thanks so much for helping us all be very informed. It's been a long time since my kids were in daycare. So I luckily don't have an issue with daycare currently. If they can't take care of themselves by now, I don't know what I'm going to do with them. But I do appreciate all the information especially for some of us that are not experiencing the problem. It's hard to comprehend the magnitude and complexity of the system. And thank you so much.
Great comment, Carrie Ann. Thank you. Anything else from our BEC? Okay. Well, hearing none, I want to once again thank Derotha for her presentation, as well as Stephanie and Leah, our earlier two speakers. And I will invite folks to jump in with any roundtable announcements. Go ahead, Sherry.
Hi, thanks. We, of course, the Teamsters are seeking construction truck driver apprentices. So we have an opening right now for applications through July 3rd. So if there's anybody that is out there that has any connections that wants to share that, it's active on our Facebook as well as our website. And I'm always happy to share. I didn't grab the connection to drop in the chat today or our flyer, but we're definitely seeking the workforce season is underway, and it's just, we don't have enough. And we just, you know, we had a big winter season where we had a lot of out-of-state Teamsters that came to the rescue, if you will. And so, you know, we're still needing to grow our local workforce. So if there's any, but not just us, all of the trades, we're all looking for that need. So I know our partners there with Alaska Works are on copy here and in the chat and so forth. So just a real big push for local workforce, and then having this conversation. Thank you. I did want real quick with Derotha. I think she made a really good point, is taking those small steps to show that your workers and your employees that that you're there to support them and do little things that add up eventually. That was my takeaway. It was really huge. So thank you for that.
Thanks for that comment, Sherry. Great. Thanks, Carrie Ann, for putting in the chat the reminder about the October in-person BEC meeting. It will be at O'Malley's on the Green, and she put a nice little link there. And please stay engaged with us at the BEC. Invite, share your network of contacts, the value of the Business Education Compact. We are going to take a recess in July. We are taking two recesses, one in July and the other in December. But we will be back in August, and the session for August is going to be about creative solutions that employers have engaged to implement in-house training programs that create opportunities. So if you are an employer and you have created your own training program that is innovative and you want to share that with the BEC, please go ahead and contact me. We have a few irons in the fire for speakers for August, but we love to hear from the BEC. So folks in this group. So please go ahead and contact me if you have any even ideas, even if you don't want to present on your own organization. If you have an idea, share it with me. Okay, with that, I think maybe we are going to give you 10 minutes of your day back, which is highly unusual for us. So enjoy. And thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.